Welcome to At Home with the League. Before we start our program, I want you to know that this Zoom is being taped. So if you don't want to appear on tape, it's time to sign off now. Okay, thank you. My name is Joanna Leifer. I am the Program Committee Chair for the New York City League of Women Voters. Every month, the Program Committee invites an expert speaker to discuss a social or political topic impacting New Yorkers. Today's program is particularly current. It deals with the New York State and City Board of Elections. Can it be improved? And I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. I want to tell you a little bit about next month's program. That's on Tuesday, November 16th. We are presenting an extremely pressing topic dealing with the new Texas abortion law. We have a speaker who has come before us before, David Cohen, who's the staff lawyer for the Women's Law Project, who will discuss what's going on there, the ramifications, the constitutionality, and of course, it's changing every day. So this should be a very interesting, informative meeting. And going on, I have to tell you a few details. First of all, you must all realize that you're all muted. That's so there's no ambient noise and nobody can interrupt the speakers. Then after their presentation, so there are going to be two presentations. We're going to do a short presentation on the amendments that are going to be on the ballot in November. And then we're going to go into the Board of Elections. You can type your questions into the chat function at the bottom of your screen and mark it for everyone so that everyone can see them and somebody will read them off and our speakers will answer them. Next, I'd like to introduce our co-president of the New York City League, Diane Burrows, who will give you a little more information about our league and discuss some of our upcoming events.
Great, thanks.
Diane, are you?
Yep, so thank you. Yeah, thank you, Joanna, and welcome everybody. As you can imagine, we've been pretty busy around here and we've got a lot of events coming up I just wanted to share with everybody. First of all, tomorrow evening, the Education Committee is going to be joined by a special guest, Jenna Ryall. Jenna is the Director of Civics for All at the New York City Department of Education. She co-designed the Civics for All initiative, which is the comprehensive K-12 civic education program available to all New York Department of Education schools. So she'll be there at the Education Committee tomorrow at 5. So go onto the website and get yourself on that. Also, mark your calendars right now, October 19th, to get your tickets for our Oktoberfest Voter Fest. We're going to be hosting a trivia event at 4 different bars around New York City. And if you go to our website, you can sign up and test your knowledge about what's on the ballot. And of course, you're going to have a good cheat sheet going tonight with the presentation. So that'll be great. On October 23rd, we are going to have League members on Governor's Island for a Get Out the Vote event. And if you're available to help out for that October 23rd event, reach out to our Voter Services Committee. Criminal Justice Reform Committee is actively participating in the events to close Rikers Island, and you can reach out to them for more information. If you are not yet a member of the League, we are offering free tickets to the dress rehearsal on November 2nd. Yes, that's Election Day, for Lynn Nottage's new Broadway play called Clydes. And this offer is for people who have never been members of the League and are now joining. So check out our website for that information. Also, Tuesday, October 26th at 7 p.m., we are the co-hosts of the WABC mayoral debate with the leading contenders. That's going to be 7 p.m. on ABC TV. It's also being broadcast on Univision and also on the radio at 1010 Wins. So check that out. That's going to be Tuesday evening, 7 p.m., October 26th. So thank you all again. And this is going to be a wonderful program. Thank you all.
Thank you, Diane. That is a lot of exciting programs coming up. That's great. And now we're going to have our exciting program, which is, can our Board of Elections be improved? As you probably know, the New York City Board of Elections is known for consistently making mistakes in elections. And last June was a particular example of that. The New York City Board of Elections blundered the primary elections by failing to exclude approximately 135,000 test ballots. Fortunately, this error was caught and rectified. But this is not unusual, so it will be interesting to hear what our speakers have to say. We have two speakers today. Our speakers, well, first of all, let me say, we are going to have a short interim discussion of the 5 amendments that are going to be on the ballot this November 2nd. And Kate Doran, who I'll tell you more about in a little bit, will be discussing what they are so you have a better idea on what you're voting for. But for both of our speakers, our main speaker is Miss LuLu Friesdat. She is the co-founder and executive director of SMART, that's capital S-M-A-R-T elections. She is a journalist and filmmaker who has contributed to coverage at ABC News. Her election security investigations have received over 4 million views on Now This News. Her journalism and advocacy work has been featured on the Washington Post, The Hill, Politico, the Christian Science Monitor, Salon, and Truout, amongst other media. Over the course of a more than 10-year career in network news, she has been assigned with, she had assignments with NBC, MSNBC, CNBC, CBS, Fox News Channel, and Nightline. You can follow her on her Twitter, which is at LuLu Friesdat. That's LuLuFriesdat. Our other speaker is our own Kate Doran, who has been a member of the New York City League of Women Voters since 1977, when she was a baby. And she is now our voting reform activist since 2004, when she became a poll worker in Brooklyn. Kate monitors the weekly meeting of the commissioners of the New York City Board of Elections and regularly testifies before the New York City Council and the New York State Senate Assembly Elections Committee. Currently, Kate serves as a director on the board of the State League of Women Voters, where she works closely with Jennifer Wilson, who is the legislative director to advance election and voter reform. Kate is our election specialist and longtime member of the Voter Services Committee. So I'm going to turn this over to Kate in a few minutes. She will give you a brief preview of the 5 proposed constitutional amendments that will be on the November 2nd election. So Kate, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Joanna, and thank you all for coming this evening. I see lots of faces and names of good friends and colleagues, so that's really very affirming, very delightful. So let me dive right in. I'm working from the New York State League's Voter Guide Part 2, which describes the proposals that are on the ballot for this November. Of course, they'll be on your ballot if you go to vote early as well. So what I've done is I'm going to share the screen. But before I do that, I want to tell you that the back of the voter guide has important dates laid out. And there's one that is not exactly correct. It talks about the 26th of October as the last day to postmark an application for an absentee ballot. Well, that's actually not correct. The important date to remember is October 18th, and that is a receive by date, which means that the Board of Elections must receive your application if you want a ballot mailed to your home or some other place. So by next Monday, the 18th, you have to email, fax, or go to the online portal and get in that application. If you want to apply in person, you can walk into the Board of Elections, however, and you can do that up until November 1st. So let me go now to the screen. All righty. And what I've done is I have just highlighted the actual language that you're going to see on the ballot. Okay, so this is the first one. Excuse me. This is the first one. This is the really wonky, complicated one. This is about the redistricting and changing requirements for approval of maps, etc. And I'm just going to tell you, because this is very wonky and complicated, and there are going to be other opportunities to hear about this more in detail, that the League of Women Voters opposes this proposal. And we oppose it because we believe that it unfairly minimizes the power of the minority party. And that is laid out clearly in the voter guide if you have a chance to take a look at it. But we have a sterling reputation in the League of Women Voters for being nonpartisan, strictly nonpartisan. And we're demonstrating it here. We're saying, even though some of us may be left-leaning and some of us may be enrolled in one party or the other, we do not want to diminish the power of the minority party. And this particular amendment will do that. It eliminates, for example, the supermajority that would be required to overturn certain things and goes to a simple majority. And we do not endorse that. So now the next one is a lovely one. This is about clean air and water, and I can't find anybody, the League can't find anybody who's really opposing this. So if you would like to be guaranteed in the New York State Constitution's Bill of Rights, the right to clean air, water, and a healthy environment, we encourage you, please vote yes here. Number 3. This is the one that we have been calling over the years the same day registration amendment. But that is not strictly true, because even if we vote yes on this, which we strongly encourage you to do, the state legislature is going to have to write enabling legislation, because what this particular proposal does, it just removes any kind of requirement, any kind of deadline to vote. But that's the floor under what can happen in New York State. So the state, the Assembly and the Senate has to write enabling legislation, and coalitions like Let New York Vote and the League, of course, are very closely involved in nudging the legislature to write what we think is the correct legislation. Okay, now this is the one. Anybody who's a longtime member of the League knows about this one. You ready for this? Are you all seated down? We have been working on no excuse absentee voting for 50 years, back in the 70s. And anybody who applied for an absentee ballot way back then will remember that you actually had to indicate on the application the name of your doctor or the hospital you were going to be admitted to if you were going to have a medical procedure. And we achieved changes in that, but that wasn't the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is, if you want to vote absentee, you just should be able to say, I would like an absentee ballot. Okay, the last one is a strictly New York City proposal. And this one will raise the dollar amount. Let's see, I think I went backwards, did I? Sorry, folks. Here it is. Here we go. This is a strictly New York City amendment, and it will allow the limit, the jurisdictional limit, to be raised to $50,000. Now, the State League is taking no position on this, and I don't believe that the City League has either. I tried to find out if the Bar Association was taking a position. They were not, but I have learned that it will decrease the burden on the Supreme Court, and it will permit. Probably what will happen is there will be less wait for the average citizen who wants to have something heard in the Supreme Court, something that will go down to weeks rather than months. As I say, the State League is taking no position on this. It's a strictly New York City thing. I don't know whether the Campaign Finance Board is taking a position. We can find out perhaps. There may be somebody on this Zoom who knows that, but there you go. And I'm happy to stop sharing and take questions. Oh, I couldn't possibly have explained it that well that there are no questions.
I'm looking to see if there's anything I can see that I don't know. There's somebody here who's talking about the indivisible Westchester. Do you see anything? I don't really see anything here.
Let's see. Well, I know Deborah from our grassroots Let New York Vote calls, and she's saying we do not want a filibuster for redistricting. The proposal is for majority decision only if there is a divided legislature, i.e. one house controlled by the Ds and one by the Rs. 60% vote would be required if both houses are controlled by one party under Proposal 1. But as we know, that is currently the case, that both one party controls both houses.
Now, I see there are a couple of hands up. We encourage you to type in your question if that's possible, because we really don't want a lot of people talking. I see Mary Thorpe and Deborah. Oh, Deborah, you already have your question there, or what? Can you type what you want in, Mary? Can you see how to do that? No, okay.
Well, Jennifer, who is our resident state expert on this, has said that the 60% versus simple majority isn't about what party is in control. It's about how many commissioners vote in favor of maps.
Okay.
Does that help anyone out there?
What I suggest, I think you gave a lot of information very quickly, and maybe people have to sit and think about it, and they'll think about it while the presentation is going on. Oh, here's something by Mary Thorpe. I hope I pronounced your name right. A New York City lawyer says the flip side of Proposition 5 is that while the Supreme Court may get relief, the lower courts, which are already jammed, will be even more crowded.
Well, that's a fair point. I guess all of our courts are crowded, and maybe there is, maybe the solution is to change the structure of the courts. And this some have said that this is merely a Band-Aid. This is not going to do the job. But we are not taking a position, so.
Okay, well, you keep thinking of questions, but I think we're going to turn this over to LuLu. Would you start us off?
I'd be delighted to. Thank you so much for having me here, Joanna. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, terrific, great. So before I get started, I do want to say that I'm delighted to be here. My mother, who is probably the person who is most influential in my life, she's 92 years old now, is a long time, lifelong advocate and activist and member of the League of Women Voters. And whenever I talk to her about my work, she will almost inevitably say to me, "Did you check in with the League? You're doing wonderful work. Did you talk to the League and share this with them? And what did they say?" And she's, and so I've been a lifelong fan of the League of Women Voters, and the work that you do is necessary and admirable and historic. And so thank you so much for all of your contributions. And I specifically am delighted to be here with Kate, because I'm a big fan of Kate's in particular and the work that she's done, keeping us all informed literally every week. What is the Board of Elections doing? That's just incredibly critical work. So thanks for that. So what I'm going to do, there's been a lot of information about the boards of elections, and they aren't functioning correctly. And I think we're all really aware of the fact that they're not functioning correctly, because just year after year, we get, these huge snafus, disasters, 200,000 active voters illegally purged from the rolls, ballots not counted correctly. And I think we're all sort of wondering, like, well, God, what is that? Like, other states seem to manage to run their elections a little better. Like, why are we in such a mess? And I think some of it is particular to New York State, and some of it has to do with the fact that our national elections are actually kind of a mess too. And if you haven't lived in other states or studied other states, you might not know that. But I'm going to try to do a bit of an overview in terms of really where I think some of the key problems lie. And some of this I'm going to talk about because I think that I've listened to a lot of the other coverage that's gone on, the hearings at the State Board of Elections, a lot of some really good panels that took place, but some of these issues were not actually discussed. And I want to make sure that we're drilling down into these issues. So I think I'm able to share my screen, and I'm going to do that. And I have my presentation queued up. With, I think, just, to give us some visuals, let's make sure that, here we go, because I think it's helpful to see things in writing sometimes, kind of sort of you can absorb the information visually as well as hearing. So I'm sharing that screen. And for those who can't see, these are just slides. This says smartelections.us, Board of Election Reform. Our logo, democracy is not a spectator sport, a presentation by LuLu Friesdat, Executive Director of Smart Elections. And Kathy Collins has taught me well that we need to make sure that people who can't see are able to follow along with us. So there's three particular topics that I want to discuss. And I just want to make sure, I want to check in with you and see, you're seeing my screen? Yeah, okay, great. So, and I can see some of your faces here. So when I was at this presentation that Dr. Hazel Dukes was at, she's the head of the NAACP here in New York State. And one thing I noticed is she said the same thing over and over and over. And it's the only thing that I remember from that presentation, or the main thing, because she said it and she said it and she said it. And what she said in terms of boards of elections is training and resources, training and resources, training and resources. And I agree with her. Those are really, really critical. And I'm going to kind of go even up a level from that. Before you get into the training and the resources, there are some kind of broader things. And I want you to remember this. Bipartisan elections don't work. They don't work as a country. We need to move beyond them. And in the same way that the League of Women Voters has been a long thinking organization, as Kate said, you've been working on that one issue for 50 years. Bipartisan elections don't work because the people running the elections have a stake in the election, and therefore they cannot be objective. They cannot really focus on what's fair. They work for a different boss, their parties. And I'm going to come back to this slide, but I want to just dwell on this. There are experts who are telling us that bipartisan elections don't work. This is an email exchange that I had with Professor Pippa Norris from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. She said, political parties running US elections is a pure conflict of interest. In established democracies, there are normally election commissions with neutral and impartial professional civil servants. And she went on to cite the UK, Norway, and Germany as examples. And according to the website at the Australian Electoral Commission, the Australian Electoral Commission places special emphasis on political neutrality to provide Australians with an independent electoral service. So that's very different from what we have here in the US, and we're an outlier, is what Professor Norris is saying. And here in New York State, in particular, this is embedded in our Constitution. Our Constitution requires that, I think there's 3 particular jobs that always have to be done by a bipartisan team. And it includes counting the votes, things that are at the center of the elections. So there are ways to get around that without changing the Constitution. We know that it's possible to change the Constitution because we've got constitutional amendments on the ballot right now, but we also know that there's ways around it, probably. And so one way, there's an attorney, David Sippert, who is a professor at NYU Law School, and he has written 3 sample pieces of legislation, which he is going to try to move forward this session. And one of them would establish a Secretary of State for New York, and that person would be required to be nonpartisan, not to be a member of either party. And so we might be able to sidestep the Constitution with that. He's an attorney and he believes that that's possible. And even if that's not possible, it's something that we need to be thinking about long-term. Are there ways to move away from the partisan administration of elections? And I see Deborah and Mary both have their hands up, but I'm wondering if that's from previously that your hands are still up, or if you have new comments. I'm going to go ahead and keep going. So I'm going to go back now. Oh, and let me see if I just have one more slide on that. Okay, so this is my next point from my 3 slides here. And this is a slide with 3 circles in the center, and each one of the circles has one of my main points that I really want you to remember at the end of this presentation. And my point number 2 is that vote centers are not the answer. And over again, when I go to forums, I hear people excited about vote centers and how we need to move to vote centers and how they're going to change everything, and everything's going to be, it's like this kind of like euphoria, this beautiful world that will exist for voting when we all have vote centers. And I am here to tell you that that is not the case. Vote centers are not the answer, and they are not the silver bullet. And one way we know that is because other places, large metropolitan areas like New York City, have tried vote centers. And when they were tried last year in 2020 in LA, they were a disaster. And there were hours-long lines, 3-hour-long lines. The technology that they relied on was the disaster. Much of it didn't function. And this is from the LA Times. What LA County voters experienced on election day was worse than just the expected bugs and hiccups of people getting used to something new. The brand new ballot marking machines and check-in tablets appeared to have malfunctioned in many vote centers, causing long lines. When you move to a vote center model, you are very, very dependent on technology. Again, I'm going back to the article. Many voters reported that the system couldn't find their names, forcing them to cast provisional ballots. Some people simply gave up after spending hours in line and left without voting. We will never know how many people were disenfranchised by the chaos on Tuesday. So when I hear Douglas Kellner, the co-chair of the New York State Board of Elections, blithely testifying to the state Senate, oh, let's move to the LA system. He literally just said that and everybody nodded in agreement. I'm telling you, that is not a great solution. And there are other reasons why we don't want vote centers. Vote centers make audits difficult and expensive. The price of a recount in LA County now starts at about $200,000. That's almost $250,000 just to get the ballots before the cost of paying for the recount itself is even calculated. And that's because those ballots, you might want to count a particular race, a particular district, you've got to go all over and get those ballots. So it's very expensive. And then the other,
I'm sorry, I just to interrupt for a second. I see there's a couple of people who have come in, and first of all, one says just, what is a vote center? And then somebody else says here, how is a vote center different from a regular polling place? I know you're in the middle, but I think maybe there's some clarification there.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that people are asking questions if they don't understand. So traditionally in New York, we voted at our local polling location. Like mine is just around the corner. I live on East 32nd Street and I can just, trot over, like, I think it's literally 1 block and up half a block, and I'm at my local polling location. And that's traditionally how we voted. But what a vote center is a central location where I might have to travel further to get there, but it might be more convenient, say, if I work in that neighborhood and I can just pop in and vote if it's around the corner from where I work. That's one example that people often give. Or maybe you're shopping, or maybe you're visiting your mom, or visiting someone in the hospital, and you can just pop into a vote center. And with vote centers, you can vote anywhere usually. It's kind of the model that we have for early voting, although here in New York City, with early voting, you're assigned a vote center. It's usually a little further from your house, but it's considered more convenient because you can vote anywhere really. And what makes that possible is technology, because we have to have electronic poll books where you're basically registered everywhere. The electronic poll books allow every single polling location to have a list of all voters because it's electronic. So it relies on technology. But now, oh, I see I have a typo in this one also in this slide, but one other reason to think about why a vote center might not be a good technology for our future is that we know that climate change is coming. And estimates are that seawater could rise by as much as 2.5 feet by 2050. So a model for voting where people have to travel further, where they have to use the subway or they have to drive to their voting location instead of walking around the corner, is something that we really have to think twice about. So I want you to just, these are things that I haven't heard other people really talking about. And so I want to make sure that we are thinking proactively. And then the third point that I really want you to, did that answer the questions about vote centers? Any more, we understand what those are? Okay, I'm not seeing, and I'm not trying to follow along in the chat right now, because so go ahead and throw a hand up or something if you need some more clarification. So the third point that I really want you to take away from this information is that technology is at the center of our elections now. And you really have to think about every single aspect of our elections. And we're talking about technology. We're talking about voter registration that here in New York City, you can now do online, about early voting, where you have technology that tracks your ballot and tells you, is your ballot application on the way? Did your ballot arrive? To do the early voting, we need the ballot on demand machines. Those are the machines, again, technology that print the ballot for different districts in one location. Electronic poll books, which I just talked about. We are voting on machines and have been for some time, but now one thing many people are not aware is that even our audits are being done by machines in many locations. And this is a new change starting in around 2015, the legislature changed, and then I believe in 2016, the State Board of Elections enacted regulations. We have in New York State a mandate that all of the machines have to have a 3% audit to make sure that the machines are counting correctly and that the correct candidates are being elected. And in the original statute, that had to be a hand counted audit. But the new legislation that was passed and the new regulations that were implemented in 2016 now allow for that 3% audit to be done by a machine, as long as it's a different machine than the first machine, and as long as it's a machine that is certified by the State Board of Elections. So in about 50% of the counties now, we haven't been able to track down exactly how many, but 50% of them have contracts with a vendor named Clear Ballot that has been certified whose machines have been certified to do the audit. And when they do those audits by machine, they do look at a few ballots by hand, but it is a very, very, very small number. So I want you to be aware that everything in our not everything, but many, many aspects of our elections are influenced and under control of technology now. And that is why it is so important that we have people who are hired, who have expertise in technology, and we have people who are trained in technology. And the system that we currently have, where our election officials, especially our commissioners, are appointed via patronage. They are appointed by their political parties, the Republican and the Democratic parties, and they are loyal to those parties, and therefore they are chosen by their parties. They are not chosen for their expertise. They are not chosen because they know about technology, because they have computer science expertise, because they know how to protect from hacking, or they know how to program, a database system that makes, voter registration work smoothly. They are chosen for their loyalty to the party. And this is a huge problem in New York City boards of elections and around the state. And these are my 3 bullet points in terms of solutions. These are the things that I firmly believe we need to focus on. That's hiring, training, and the third one is data transparency. And I just want to very briefly touch on this and then take questions so that we can, have some time to discuss things. But I'm going to just skip through a few of these slides. This is a really good one to look at, actually. This is language also from another proposed piece of legislation by David Sippert. Specifications for hiring shall also give due weight to expertise in current and emerging election technologies and their risks. That means, like, can they be hacked? Do they make mistakes? And to experience with risk mitigation. That means, what can you do to help them being hacked or make mistakes? Risk mitigation practices, and to election process, procedures, and chain of custody, including but not limited to auditing for positions, including but not limited to auditing for positions that so require. Also, he said all full-time employees shall undergo background checks. And these are, this is a part of his legislation that I worked closely with him on. These specifically are some of our suggestions for how to move from a patronage system to a system of skills. And this would be both hiring and training. And the other really important thing in terms of training is that we absolutely have to start talking about training for voters, for the poll workers and the staff to be sensitive to voters with disabilities. Many of the poll workers and the election staff seem not to know how the ballot marking devices work, not to be turning them on, getting them ready, testing them ahead of time. And this is making voting for voters with disabilities in our state incredibly frustrating, and it's illegal. We are supposed to be training people to use these ballot marking devices, and we are supposed to be sensitive to voters with disabilities. In New York, we have a law that you're not supposed to have to wait more than 30 minutes. This is routinely violated by the New York City Board of Elections, and it is particularly a hardship for voters with disabilities. So I think those are kind of like, those are my overviews. And when we're talking about solutions, hiring, training, and data transparency is the other point that I want to make. We do not have the data transparency that we need. The Brennan Center calls this information sharing, which is also a good term for it. And it is also one of their priorities. We cannot have public oversight of our elections unless we have more data transparency. That means more people from more categories are able to be poll watchers, and more of the election data is easily, quickly available to the public in easy to use formats. And that's a little bit of a kind of a tunnel. You can get into the weeds there, but if we don't have access to the election results and spreadsheets that are easy to use and broken down by very specific categories, there is no way for us to check if the election results are accurate or not. And we should also have access to the digital ballot images, which are the photographs that the voting machines take in order to count the votes. And that's a piece of legislation that we're really interested in with the sister organization I founded, Smart Legislation. Okay, so that's kind of a lot of information. I'm going to go back to my 3 bullet points about my solutions, just for review: hiring, training, and data transparency. So I think that's a good place for me to stop and see if we have some questions. How do you feel, Joanna? And Kate, do you want to go ahead and weigh in? Because I know Kate had some points that she really wanted to hit.
Go ahead, Kate. Let's
Yes,
see what
thank
Kate
you.
said.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? I'm not muted? Okay.
Right.
Okay. LuLu is exactly right about hiring, training, and data transparency. But if we're going to talk about structure, we need to address the very important issue of accountability. Accountability means that you're answerable to someone. you know, if you have a child, you have to be accountable to your child, and the child has to be accountable to the parent. We all know what that means. So in the world of the structure and the administration of elections, we need professionals who are accountable to the voters, and nowhere in New York State do we have that currently. In New York City, it's glaringly obvious because party leaders behind the scenes, unknown to anyone, appoint, they say they nominate, but they essentially select and appoint the commissioners of election, and they're rubber stamped by the city council. So it's very important to think carefully about what kind of structure do we want? Do we want to elect our election officials so that we could throw the bums out if they do a terrible job? What do we want to do? Do we want a governor or an elected official like a secretary of state perhaps to be responsible for elections? We're working on that at the state league level. We have a committee, and I see some of my fellow members of that committee on this call this evening, but that's the point I wanted to add to LuLu's excellent recommendations.
And I'll just add, in terms of solutions, there is specific legislation. Liz Kruger and I believe it's Nili Rozic have proposed a bill that would address some of these issues. It does address hiring and training. I personally do not feel that it goes far enough. And one of my key complaints about this piece of legislation is that it puts hiring and training in the hands of the State Board of Elections. I'm not convinced that the State Board of Elections is really a better option than the City Board of Elections. And I'm just going to give one example of that, which I think the League of Women Voters might understand as a group full of women. The State Board of Elections is 4 men, and it's been 4 men for quite a while. And they're 4 white men, actually. And it's 2021. And in my opinion, any organization that does not understand that in this day and age, having 4 white men in charge of all of the elections for the state is inappropriate, and hasn't in some way taken measures to self-monitor, to self-regulate, and make decisions that would make that a more equitable and representative board, is not showing good judgment. And there are other cases where I don't believe they've shown good judgment, where they are following their own belief system, but not best practices. Certainly that they certified the Dominion ice machine, even though security experts around the country were in opposition to it. 5 separate disability groups wrote in opposition to it. It was certified anyway. So I'm seeing serious lapses of judgment at the State Board of Election office. And why then would we put the responsibility for hiring and training in the hands of those officials? So that is one of my concerns about the Board of Election legislation that has been proposed by Senator Kruger, although I have deep respect for Senator Kruger, and she's, I think that her efforts are admirable. I just think they don't go far enough. And I think we need to really think about who is going to be responsible for these parameters that are so important to our elections being well administered and competent. We really have to figure out, how are we going to get competence and technical expertise? So I love questions.
I see here, if you scroll through the comments, I don't see so much questions as comments. Can you see this? And I thought maybe you might want to address some of these, but I'm not really sure.
I see one, Joanna, from Deborah Porter. She's saying, how would we determine that board employees or a Secretary of State is nonpartisan? Would there be a look back period, and for how long? Otherwise, people could just change their registration to get the job. That's a fine point.
Okay.
I agree. And I don't have a solution for that. I think that that's why the sort of 50,000 view that I started with is that we need to move our elections away from a partisan culture. And these are cultural issues. In Australia, they've had a neutral election commission for decades, and they they're committed to that. And so if we moved into a culture where we were expecting our election officials to be nonpartisan, I think that we could gradually transition to that. I'm not sure that it would happen overnight, but I actually think I pulled up the Australian Board of Election page where they recruit their members, and it's very informative in terms of what they're expecting. This is from the Australian Election Commission, political neutrality. The AAC places special emphasis on political neutrality because it is responsible for providing the Australian people with an independent electoral service. It is essential that AEC employees are and are seen to be politically neutral. All AE staff, both permanent and temporary, are required to provide a declaration of political neutrality, which is designed to ensure that there is no conflict of interest before they are considered for employment. Having had a party affiliation at some time in the past does not automatically rule someone out, but all staff are required to behave neutrally and face instant dismissal if they do not. So, they have some requirements and they have a culture of neutrality, and we, could move toward that. And you can also have people sign no conflict of interest statements. That's definitely something that you can move toward. You can make sure that they are not currently an office holder in a party, things like that. So you definitely can have statements that, that move in that direction. Anything else?
I want you to look.
Ruth Strauss has a hand up.
Yes, well, I know Ruth wants to ask something. I just told her she could type it in, but let's see if I can get her unmuted and to see. Ruth, are you unmuted? You seem to have a question. No, you aren't.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Just to let you know, the typing in of questions was probably the better way to do it, but.
Well, actually, this is a question and a statement, and so and I couldn't type it all in. Anyway, hi Lulu. Great talk. I hope that you're not quixotic in thinking that we could find neutral people in this day and age, although maybe we could find enough in each state, but some of the states, I think, clearly wouldn't want neutral people. I just wanted to make, in terms of the people that would, set up the elections and software and all of that, I just wanted to say one thing about the quote unquote Los Angeles experience. It was, not only was it horrendous from what you all showed, however, our registrar spent $300 million on those voting, marking devices and poll books and all of that. I got a hold of a technical report on those. This was never really publicized, but some people who were interested found that system had 47 fails, and of those 43 fails or flaws, and of those 7 were outright fails, meaning they should never have been used, because those machines should never have been used because they were insecure, including things like being able to open the printer where you could the printer attached to the ballot box, you could remove ballots, you could put ballots in. There were, no logs that were being kept of when the machines were entered or not entered. Anyway, I just wanted to say that even people who supposedly were knowledgeable out here and supported it and are in the voting rights movement really didn't know that these technical reports were out there. So I'm just putting in a word for people like yourself, Lulu, and people who really need to drill down on the security of these machines and their flaws. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. And I guess before we get too much further, I do just want to make you aware that, as I said, we have Smart Elections is a project that I co-founded, and then we also have a sister organization, Smart Legislation, which is working very actively to try to improve some of the election security, and also voting rights legislation in the state. And is it okay if I just take people through a few of our key points and how they can get involved and do more, Joanna?
Please do, please do.
Okay, super. So let me just, I put together a little presentation on that. I think this will just take us 5 minutes, but there's a tremendous awareness now. People are becoming more aware of how important this technology is and how we've got to get it right here. Ruth was just describing how they totally missed the boat in LA. And it wasn't because they weren't warned. I have to say there were lots of people, security experts, that warned them about those systems, that they were going to be very, very problematic. So this is our coalition. It is a broad and really active statewide coalition with a lot of disability advocates and voting rights advocates from Niagara Falls all the way down to New York City. We put together a slide that has some of the groups that have joined this coalition. So you can see here, there's groups, all the indivisibles on the left, and then many of the other groups who have signed on to our letters demanding better technology and more secure systems. And more recognizable names: New York Democratic Lawyers Council, NIPAN, Westpac Foundation. I'm sure those are groups that you're probably aware of. And some of the disability rights groups that we're working with: American Council of the Blind of New York, and the New York Association on Independent Living. So those are some names that you'll see there. We would love to be working collaboratively with the League of Women Voters. As I've mentioned, I'm deeply, deeply respectful of this organization. This is our #1 priority, the hybrid ban bill. And this is because this machine has been determined by security experts to be extraordinarily risky. This is from Professor Richard DeMillo. He is one of the top election security experts in the country. He said these all-in-one devices pose extraordinary risks for the voters of New York, and I urge you to reject their use. And so there is a bill that would do that. Deborah Porter, who is an attorney on the call, has been very influential in helping us draft this legislation. It passed the Senate last year, so we got close, but we have to pass the Assembly. So we'll go back and and we'll pass the Senate again, I'm fairly confident, and we very much hope to get it through the Assembly. Your organization could help us do that. I know that the League of Women Voters has not taken a position on this, but I encourage you to research it and to take a position. I know that you've taken positions on things as controversial as abortion. And so I think that banning hybrid voting machines is much less controversial than that. And I urge you to take a position on this. It is so important that we don't allow bad technology into the state, because we cannot recover from it. Once bad technology is here, then we wind up voting on it and we lose confidence because we don't know if the machines have counted correctly or not. So I urge you to support that bill. These are some of the other bills that we're supporting. These are excellent pieces of legislation, and this is our full packet that we hope to get through this session. This is a wonderful piece of legislation protecting voters, the New York Voting Rights Act that Senator Myrie has sponsored. Public access to digital ballot images. It's something that I talked about earlier. Where it's part of transparency. Each of the scanner takes a photograph of your ballot. There is no violation to privacy, because by the time it takes this photograph, the ballot is completely separated from any identifying mark. So this is just a neutral ballot that is being taken a photograph of by a scanner. And then all of these ballots can be put online. They will not reveal how anyone voted, but collectively they will tell us if we are counting the votes correctly. It is a check on the technology. It is using technology to check technology, which is what we need to do. Going back to hiring and training, that's why we need people who understand technology, because they'll know when it's useful. This is very useful technology. We support that bill. We also want a better way of getting voting machines into the state. So we've proposed a different RFP process. Currently, the vendors are really pushing their equipment on us. They tend to push expensive equipment that often has security failures. This last year, ES&S tried to certify and sell us voting machines that were running Windows 7 operating systems. That was not even going to be supported within 6 months by Microsoft, and they tried to sell us those machines. And they were expensive. Those machines cost twice as much as your average scanner. So these people, they have an agenda, and their agenda is to make money and sell us voting machines, for the least cost to them. What we want is an RFP process where our election officials can say what we want in voting machines. We are supporting the Board of Election reforms that I mentioned to you, hiring, training, and data transparency. We're trying to figure out what bills would be best for that. I think you can see at the bottom of my screen here, we are looking for secure, fair, accessible, well-administered, and verifiable elections. And I urge you to join us. We have meetings on Fridays at noon, and I will put in the chat how to join those meetings. They're great meetings every Friday at noon. As I said, it's a statewide coalition, and we are really getting a team of people who are up to speed on technology, because they're really thinking about this on an ongoing basis and integrating this with all of their voting rights experience. And we have a really, really strong coalition now, and I urge you to join us. And I'll go ahead and put the link in the chat where you can sign up for those Friday noon meetings. And even if you don't think you're going to come to the Friday noon meetings, go ahead and sign up, because you'll get the email about what we're doing and you'll stay better informed. So I'm going to put that into the chat.
Okay. Thank you. I'm looking at here. I saw Laura Klieg a few minutes ago. She has something written in here, and I don't know if this has been answered already. Do you see her question? What kind of prototype for neutrality do you have in mind that is in other areas of government in the United States?
I mean, I think that's why I read you that, kind of the outline from the Australian Election Commission. And we do have areas of the government that do attempt to be more nonpartisan. Here in New York, I think the agency that does it the best is the Open Records Agency. That is an agency that has been nonpartisan. It's a government agency. They have been lauded as being efficient and supportive. I've talked to election officials who get great support from them, no matter which party they're from. We do have agencies that are nonpartisan. So I do think that we have examples of that. If we look around, the judges are supposed to be nonpartisan, right? So I think that if we really start to invest in creating a nonpartisan culture, we can do that. It can be done, absolutely.
Okay, is there anything else that you see? We are getting lots of comments, and I'm finding this really interesting, but I'm trying to see if there are statements that you can answer here.
I'm sorry, I haven't had time to look in the chat. I'm happy to have people share comments if they, if there's things that they really, want to add to the conversation. I love more dialogue. That's exciting.
Here's one here, Kathleen, security is necessary relative on a spectrum. Some ballot scanning devices are reasonably secure, especially when coupled with publicly available ballot images and meaningful audits. However, other ballot scanning devices coupled with ballot markers present serious risks. Using machines to mark ballots is one thing, but if those votes are not on paper ballots, they are tabulated separately, that can be a problem. Okay.
I agree with that. Was that Kathy Collins?
That is Vanessa.
Oh, that's Vanessa.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think what Vanessa is saying there, and Vanessa's an attorney and very well versed in voting rights issues and security issues. We need ballot marking devices. It's very, very important for us to have ballot marking devices. Voters with disabilities need them. Voters with disabilities are actually the single largest minority voting bloc in the country now. People don't realize that, but we actually just did 2 programs on it, and the expert research from Rutgers estimates the disability voting population around 31 million, which is larger than either the Hispanic or the Black voting blocs. And as think of our aging population, we need them to use devices to help them vote if they need them. But what we also need to do is to make those devices as secure as possible. What security experts don't want is for the machine that marks your ballot with a printer to be the same machine that counts your ballot with a scanner and a tabulator. And here's the reason for that. Here's the reason why you always want your printer completely separate from your counter, It's because if the machines are the same machine, then the machine that prints could also possibly print on your ballot after you cast it and change your vote. And we never want that. Once your ballot is cast, we never want it to go back under the print head. Security experts call that type of design where the ballot after it's cast goes back under a print head. Security experts say that's basically like handing your ballot to a person with an open pen. That person could change your vote, could cross out your vote, delete your vote, add votes. And that is what voting machines that do this, they are called hybrid voting machines because they print and scan. That is what they have the capability to do. Hybrid voting machines can add, change, and delete votes according to security experts. And that is why we are so adamantly against them, because that paper ballot has to be our gold. That has to be our absolute record of what the voter intended, and we have to be able to rely on it if there's any question so that we can count it if by hand if necessary, audit it, look at it, say, yes, this is absolutely how the voter voted. We have complete confidence. If that ballot has gone back under a print head, we lose that confidence. We do not know. And public confidence can plummet. And we can turn into a state like Arizona, where they're having audits and controversy about their results for months and months and years after an election. We don't want that. We have fairly good election security standards here, and we want to keep them. So that is why we are so adamantly opposed to the hybrid voting machines, and we encourage you to join us in that position. I think, so that was a response to Vanessa's comment there. I think, is that clear? Do people understand what the recommendation is about ballot marking devices, that they're necessary, but they need to be separate? Is that clear?
Mm.
And why?
It's hard to tell when everybody's hiding behind their name.
I thought I saw a few nods.
Yes,
Good
it's
point.
very clear. It's very clear to me. Yes, it's very clear to me. I understand. What I heard from the New York City Board of Elections with respect to the ballot marking device, it's a product of ES&S. And they were saying a couple of years ago, when they were thinking about the hybrid machine, that ES&S wasn't going to support the BMD that we currently have. That is, that they weren't going to continue to upgrade it. They weren't going to create new parts for it when it necessarily needed maintenance. And they wanted to sell them something that had more bells and whistles and would be extravagantly more expensive. So.
Yes, and go back to the statement that what I told you about how they then tried to sell us a piece of equipment that was running on Windows 7 software, right? Even though we're up to Windows 10 right? So it's clear what their intent is. Their intent is to sell us expensive voting equipment. And it's too bad, because that old machine that is in use in New York City, the AutoMark, is a really good ballot marking device that voters with disabilities love. And if they would continue to support that, we would be very, very happy with it. But that's a kind of basically vendor blackmail. They basically say, we're not going to support it. And so they try to get us to buy their expensive equipment. Luckily, we have more ballot marking device coming in for certification. So we are going to have options. There is a ballot marking device from Democracy Live that is coming in. They are going to be starting their certification process, I believe, in November. And that device is a separate ballot marking device from the printer scanner, which is what is recommended. Hart InterCivic I think is going to be applying for certification, although I think that one is going to take longer. But Clear Ballot is also coming in with a ballot marking device that is totally separate from a scanner. And that also, I think that certification process is going to start around the beginning of the year. But ES&S is coming back and try to get their machine, that hybrid Express Vote XL, they are coming back also around January. So the goal is to get these other machines certified and to get this legislation passed to protect us against that hybrid voting machine. So, if the vendors are going to try to twist our arm, we have to look for other vendors so that we have options, and we do.
Okay, I think we have, we've pretty much covered everything. There are a lot of very interesting comments here. I think this is terrific. I want you to know we are taping this and we will have this available if you, for people who want to go over and look at this again. Because I think there's a lot of information here and I really appreciate both you and Kate, LuLu and Kate, to have done this. And I personally have taken down that link for your Friday meetings, because I think there's a lot here to do. Thank you so much. This has been a terrific, informative meeting, and you should join the league, and you can start a whole committee.
You know what? I am going to join you. And I fully intended to join you today before I got on this call. It was on my absolute have to do list. And then I got behind making my slides and everything. But I think tonight, as soon as I get off, I am going to go and join. I am certainly inspired by this and all of the, the wonderful energy here and the comments. And I can tell just the dedication to improving our elections really is profound. And I really respect your work. So I will be joining you as soon as I get off this.
That's wonderful. And keep in touch with us. I'll become a committee chair. And it sounds like you have a lot of enthusiastic people who are responding to you. And this is the way we can get involved in more directly in these very important causes. And I really appreciate you coming. This has been a wonderful event. Kate, you've been wonderful. You always have given a lot of information. Kate is such an expert on this. Now we'll have two experts on this.
I'm not an expert. I just pay attention. That's why I call myself a specialist, but I'm not an expert. I'm learning. I'm learning every single day, and that's what's so wonderful about being part of meetings like this.
Well, I love Kate, and it would be a delight to work with her and the rest of you and, have a technology committee, something like that to explore these issues further. I do want to let people know if they want more information, they can go to our website, smartelections.us. And at the bottom of the front page, there is that link to join us at the Friday 12 p.m. meeting. So if you lose this chat or whatever, it's super easy to find it. smartelections.us. Just scroll down to the bottom of the page and click on the Friday meeting. I actually think I have it up on my screen.
Right. It's here.
So I can
put it down here. So that's good. So you have a lot of followers here, and they should all be involved in this. Thank you so much. This has been such an informative and fun presentation. Please keep in touch. Let us know what's going on, especially if you become a member. And glad that you came. Please sign in next in November, where the talk on the abortion issue in Texas should be fascinating. And hopefully there will be something positive that happens out of that. So I'm going to sign everyone off. Thank you all for coming, and we will be involved soon. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Joanna. Always.
Thank you, Joanna. Great to be here with you.
Thank you.
Bye.